The earth is hard and dry underfoot, rock and dirt where crops haven't grown in a generation. Preacher says it's cursed, and our sins are bloodshed just salting the soil. He says if we want to survive, we've got to atone. Atone? Survive? I might could have cared about survival once, but not anymore. There is no atonement, no salvation, not for me, and damn sure not here. Here we belong to the Reckoners, and I am Harold. This is my home. These are the Deadlands.
Dastardly Podcast presents the Tome Travelers.
Well, hi, this is John with Passion Early Podcast, and this is our show, Tome Travelers. And this is our main format today, a pop culture tabletop RPG retrospective.
That's a lot of words that you threw into that intro.
It is.
We're just a retrospective.
Yeah.
That's all.
Oh. Well, today, obviously, I am joined by Roxy.
Hello, hello.
And today we have a special guest joining us. We have Craig Campbell from Nerdburger Games. So thank you for joining us, Craig.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm enjoying the banter so far. I look forward to seeing where it goes.
I just pick on John a lot. That's what tends to happen.
I'll throw in behind that. Okay.
I'm a good target. It's okay, and I got a good nature about it, so it's all good. But so this is actually, in a way, your third appearance on the show.
Yeah,
because you came on when you did Capers and released with that.
Right.
And then we also did CAPERS Covert.
I missed you for CAPERS Noir, which came in between those two. But I've also been kind of spreading myself out a little bit with the podcast thing so that I'm not dominating too many podcasts all at once, because there's only so much people want to listen to me yammer on about my game. So I'm bouncing around between different people, but I'm happy to be back here. I'm not promoting anything right now. I'm just here to talk about Deadlands.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to obviously topic of the day is that we are going to be talking about Deadlands, which is an RPG originally created in 1996 by Shane Lacey Hensley and published by Pinnacle Entertainment Group.
I was just a wee lass in 1996.
Just a wee lass?
Yeah, I was, 1996 was 6th and 7th grade.
I had just gotten back from my first year of college, and that was the year I went into my punk music scene.
Oh, okay.
And I was a grad student.
Nice.
Hey, there you go.
In the master's program.
Oh.
Glutton for punishment.
We went back for more.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what is the master's program you did?
I'm an architect.
You're an architect. Okay.
I've got a master's in architecture.
All right. Because one of our friends and hopefully soon-to-be relatives, he actually is...
Yeah, he's marrying my cousin.
Yeah, he's marrying your cousin, but he is finishing up his master's program.
Research biology. Well, no, he's got his master's.
Oh, he got his master's.
He's trying to get a PhD. He's a super glutton for punishment.
Yeah, and he's appeared on the show a couple times, too, so...
I'm a high school graduate, and I'm proud of it. That's as far as I made it.
Yeah. Well, so Savage Worlds, this is a system that is...
Deadlands, because it wasn't Savage Worlds first.
Yeah, true.
Evolved into Savage Worlds, yeah.
But Deadlands, I guess you could say, is famous for the actual play Wild Cards, which we highly recommend. It's a great show.
Yeah, that's where I learned about it, anyway. Whether or not that was... one of the first types of actual plays of that length. But yeah, Saving Throw Show they did 5 seasons of Deadlands Reloaded. Mm-hmm. And it was really good. I enjoyed it a lot.
And recently, Undeadwood, which has come out from Critical Role.
It just ended on Friday.
And it's really interesting. And researching for this show, I actually learned a lot that I didn't know, because this is a property that I don't really stick to too many westerns. I got into Aces and Eights, and that was kind of my thing. I was like, okay, Aces and Eights, how many more westerns do I need? But no, This one kind of, studying up on this really threw me for a curve and everything. And then, you had put out online that you were willing to show up on some podcasts. I was like, hey, is there a property you wouldn't mind talking about?
So I suggested Deadlands actually because if I have a favorite system outside of those that I've designed myself, Deadlands is it. Deadlands really spoke to me when it came out because I am a fan of like post Civil War drama of westerns and of the camp factor, the campiness, and certainly also a big horror fan. So there's a fair bit of fantasy kind of stuff, but also with a strong horror bent in Deadlands. So I was like, they took like three of the things that I really like and they smashed them all up together and
nice
into a role playing game, which I also like.
Yeah. See, and that was one of the things when I first started. I avoided the wild card show for a long time because I've never enjoyed westerns, even though I maybe it was overexposure. My dad and my grandfather watched a ton of westerns, and I was like, oh come on, I'm a sci-fi person, but I avoided the wild cards show for a long time, and I was like, I need to watch this. These seem like good people, and I like supporting this channel, so I watched it and I fell in love with it. And I love the alternate history, which, again, I'm familiar with the Savage Worlds Deadlands Reloaded. I assume a lot of it is still the same since it's the same creator. Mm-hmm. But I love the alternate history of the American landscape in the late 1800s. And I do like, and the supernatural kind of the Lovecraftian twist on some things, and I guess it doesn't have to necessarily be Lovecraftian, but some of it feels very cyclopean, I guess. But
well, that's a great Lovecraft word, right?
Yeah.
Cyclopean. Very much so. There is a Lovecraftian element to it because and we can get into it when we talk about the lore in the setting of Deadlands. But there are these beings called the Reckoners.
Yes. That
are instrumental in like the horrible things that are happening in the West and actually like in the North and the South back east.
Sure.
And so there's certainly like, honest to goodness, like, here's a monster and it's described and there's artwork for it and everything. Whereas Lovecraft stuff, the really, really terrible stuff tends to be unimaginable.
Yeah, undescribable horror.
Yeah, but the Reckoners are kind of that way. They're the Deus ex machina of the bad guys.
Yeah.
That are kind of in control of making everything really terrible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, so one of the things we love to do with this show when we're doing our main format is we love to talk about like the things that happened and kind of came out at the same time or, as this game. Because I really feel, in the realm of nostalgia, talking about like, this was, this year this came out, this happened.
Where were we as a I guess culture at that point?
Because
society,
because it kind of, I don't want to say so much it dates it, but it really gives you kind of a flavor for the
Well,
time.
I think it's important to date it because, especially with a game that hits on alternate history and how you treat that alternate history, because there are some really horrible things that happened in our real history.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Deadlands has evolved and things have happened different. Things have been changed as of recently in how the game world is being treated and approached. That it's 1996 is kind of like we do need to understand where it came from because that year let's remind ourselves of what was going on that year. Where were we?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I kind of found a silly one that I wanted to start off with.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So Betty Rubble debuts as part of the Flintstones Vitamins.
Why was she not always in there? I don't understand.
I don't know, but my thing is at the same time to create a marketing scheme for a vitamin. Well, that was my thing.
Flintstone Vitamins were the rage.
Yeah.
When, I remember them very fondly. I still think in my deepest dreams that distinct Flintstone vitamin flavor creeps in, and it's not necessarily enjoyable, but it's definitely a reminder of times gone past. Now they're like chewy or something like that. I think they do gummies.
There's gummy types and everything now. Yeah, they're not that chalky. Like they have a bit of a sweetness flavor to them, but they were chalky.
Yeah. Oh, it was bad.
Yeah.
But that was what we had to have.
So
I imagine Betty came after Dino. Probably Dino made it in there, and Bam, where they were all.
I bet Dino was in there first.
Yeah.
I bet it was Fred.
Right from the get go. Yeah.
Yeah, Fred, Dino, and Barney, and.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know if Wilma is part of it.
Imagine Wilma was there, right? If they had 4, it was probably Fred, Wilma, Barney, and Dino, and then maybe later, as the 2 kids gained popularity, they had Pebbles and Bam Bam also had cereals and everything. We're getting we're going down a whole rabbit hole with that.
Man, that's true, man. Yeah, fruity man. Now I want some Fruity Pebbles and.
It's that flavor, and you can think of it and you can taste it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a part of our history.
Definitely.
But another thing that happened that year, the first clamshell flip phone debuts, the Motorola StarTAC, which of course generated.
How big was that thing?
Oh, it was a palmful. Even when it was flipped close, I kind of remember it.
Well, it says you have 1-inch clamshell on.
No, that's the first.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't. It's so small on my phone. Thought those were inch marks. Yeah, I bet it was just. Oh well, the clamshell phones weren't they just like one little?
Yeah, just a single flip.
Just flipped up.
Yeah, nothing special about them. Just that it flipped up, and you could have a phone that kind of cradled like an old phone.
Yeah.
You know,
but it was also one of those ones that had an antenna on it that you would also extend.
You still had to extend that.
And the thing was,
just on a side note, if you want to ever watch the progression of the cellular phone very quickly, is watch the X-Files and watch get the series, the set of DVDs or whatever. Just watch the episodes that are like the mythology.
Yeah.
So you can kind of bounce through the seasons pretty quickly, and you'll watch the phones start as like these big flip open things with the antennas that you pull out, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller over the course of the season. Because that was one of the shows that featured cell phones so much, and it was around in '96.
Yeah, well, and that does make sense because they were constantly somewhere else. You know, they were constantly traveling.
Yep. Yeah.
So they would have been one of the first. You know, it would have made sense.
Well, yeah,
they embraced the technology because the FBI would have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Well, other things going on from there. Well, I mean, just closing out I still kind of remember the flip phone, because everybody was just like, "Oh, it's Star Trek."
It looks like the comms.
Yeah, it looks like the comms from the original series. But but going on from there, so. This was also the year of publishing for Game of Thrones, the first novel in the Fire and Ice saga.
That's disgusting.
What?
It's so long. I mean, I don't know. What? I'm one of those people that I assume we're never going to get the rest.
The last book?
Well, we have 2 books that we're still waiting on, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we're never going to get them. I think he's just like... I think someone was like, please give it to us before you die. And he's like, watch me not.
Yeah.
So,
well, I always felt that way about Stephen King's The Gunslinger series, which it
took a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were, like, through the 90s specifically, I had just finished book 3. I think that was The Drawing of the Three. I'm not sure. I think that's what that one was.
Drawing of the Three was the third one, yeah.
Yeah.
Or second one.
Second one, okay.
Then Wastelands.
Wastelands. I think I had just finished Wastelands, and I had gotten it in the hardback cover that had all the crazy art inside of it.
Nice.
I mean, it's freaky art. And I was like, man, I'm never going to see the end of this. I am never... Stephen King, because, I mean, there were years, and you're just like, oh, is it coming? Is it coming? No. And then, of course,
it took forever to get to Wizard and Glass, but then, as I recall, like the last few books came pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, he just knocked them out.
Realized like I got to crank this out because what was it also during that era when he got hit by a truck and almost died?
Yes,
yeah.
And I think he started to really think about his mortality and was like, I better get this series done.
Yeah, which I appreciate. That's a storyteller who's like, I have a great story and I want to finish it.
Yep.
I want to share this story with people, where I feel like George Martin is just like raking it in, and he's like, I just don't, they're gonna love everything I do, whether it's good or not.
No.
They get longer and longer. It just takes longer to get them done. Come on, George, let's go.
Well, that's
chop.
I was because I didn't read the. Sorry, John. I'm not on a Game of Thrones tangent.
I have one that ties to role playing based on all this.
Yeah, I read them relatively late. I didn't start reading the books until the show came out.
Yeah.
And I powered through the first 4 super fast. And it was the 4th one at the end of it, because I feel like he finished that in 2006. And so it took him 10 years to get 4 books done, which I'm like, okay, they're huge. But at the end of the 4th book, he's like, so when I was writing this, I realized that I had way too much for one book. And so he decided to split it into 2. And I think it was 4th and 5th that he did that with. And he was like, the 5th one's coming in 6 months. There's actually an author's note in the back. He's like, I'll give it in 6 months. 5 years later, the 5th one came out. And I was like, if you already had it written, why in the world?
Finding an editor.
Yeah, well, I just... And that was the last one that came out. And so Winds of Winter or whatever, I think, is the 6th one. And he's been talking about releasing it since before I started reading them, and now it's like 8 years later or something like that.
Now the series has come and gone.
Yeah. I mean...
And the story has been told in one format.
Yeah. Well, and and he's always been very adamant that the story, that the show diverged from the books, which I assume it has to, but then what if it didn't? Yeah. What if we have seen the end? Yeah. And he's still going to get us to pay for the books. That's
just really briefly bringing back a classic. Because I'm thinking of it as, so if he put that out in 1996, within 5 years he had sold the rights for a role-playing game based off of that to the company that put out Besom with Mark McKinnon.
That's right.
And
right. I remember talking about that.
Yeah, within
the TriStat system or whatever.
Well, I don't know if he was going to do that, but within 5 years, it had already been slated to be a role-playing game. If it came out in 1996, that's amazing.
That setting, in and of itself, lends itself to role-play.
Oh yeah.
And what was very popular with role-playing at that point, it's just another super super duper fantasy setting that people could have, without elves and dwarves and stuff. Yeah. But dragons.
Yep. Well, moving on from there, we have music. I'll spit fire through a couple of these really quick. That was the year of the last performance of the Ramones as a group.
Sure.
That was Spice Girls' debut of their first single, "Wannabe." Mm-hmm. That was MTV2 launched, and Lisa Marie Presley and Michael Jackson divorced.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I mean,
did they also get married that year? They weren't married for long.
I think they were married for a couple of years.
Yeah,
were they? Okay.
I think they were married for 2 years. I think
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just love that MTV2 launched. So it was already in '96. MTV was like, okay, we're going to stop showing music videos, so we need to go back to this for somebody.
Yeah.
So we're well into the real world and road rules and all that stuff, because that was about the time that all of that really hit its stride, and music videos were.
Yeah.
So.
Then YouTube came in and just put the sword through
exactly.
MTV's chest. And,
yeah. When you really think about YouTube and what it did for music videos, I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
YouTube and what is it, Vivo?
Yeah.
Is that the one that?
Well, I watched a documentary about the rise and fall of the music video, and YouTube is the reason it died.
Mm.
Wow, that's
like 100% of the reason.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
The internet killed the video star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that.
Or killed the VJ anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the traditional VJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't need Carson Daly anymore.
Right, which is why he does
late night or something. Or what does he do? He's on some show.
He's had a bunch of different shows.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, film of the year. Independence Day was the highest grossing film of that year. We also had From Dusk Till Dawn, which I went through the list of movies that came out.
Is that the one that Quentin Tarantino is in?
Yes.
Okay.
He is in it.
He wrote it. Rodriguez directed it.
Okay,
yeah.
That's how it. Okay.
And George Clooney was in it.
I had the.
That's the movie that becomes a different movie halfway through.
Yes.
Nice. That's the one. See, I never saw it, but I collected movie posters, and the only way that I could get movie posters was from my DVD or my VHS rental store. So it wasn't Blockbuster, but it was one of the little local one-offs.
Yeah.
And he would always sell the movie posters, the ads. So I had all the DVD, or not, I keep saying DVD, all the VHS release posters, and I had that one on my wall. And I was like, I've never seen it, but the poster's cool.
It is. Well, and the thing was, I was trying to find a Western that came out that year that people might know about. And when I saw it, From Dusk Till Dawn, I was like, well, hey, this kind of ties in with the topic too, because it's a vampire Western kind of thing.
Kinda, yeah.
Kinda. We also had The Frighteners that year.
Was a great movie.
Wonderful soundtrack also, if you've never taken a chance to listen to it.
Yeah.
And Long Kiss Goodnight with Gina Davis, I believe it is. So
yeah, I don't think I've seen that
one either. It was
either.
Gina Davis and Samuel L. Jackson.
Okay. I think I might have had that movie poster too, now that you mention it. I had a bunch that, because they were there, and I was like, I don't know what these are, but I'm taking them. But, you got Independence Day on there, and which I loved. I remember seeing it, first opening weekend in the theater with my grandpa. But, I recently watched the new one, the sequel.
Yeah.
I think if it had been released in 97, like when it was supposed to be released, it would have been an okay movie.
Yeah.
20 years later, that writing is bad. It's just not good. And it just doesn't fit because there's so many jokes that I think were funnier in 96 or that you didn't realize how bad they were. And now with social awareness that we've gained over 20 years of, human history, that at least some social awareness, that some of those, I don't know, just the way people talk to each other. I'm like, this isn't okay in 2016.
Oh, yeah. It's like going back and watching The Next Generation, and you're like, ooh, Riker, come on, dude. No.
Yeah.
So going on from there, we're going to talk about Deadlands.
Yeah.
So 1996, it was released by Pinnacle Entertainment Group, which was actually created in 1994. And it was founded as a property holder for many skirmish games, such as The Field of Honor and later The Last Crusade, which were World War II mini-games. So I don't know about you two. I'm not a skirmish game kind of guy. So
I'm not a war gamer. I don't really play skirmish games, and I don't, when it gets to like World War II games, like Axis and Allies, and there's another one that I can't think of.
D-Day?
Right,
that was a huge one.
Yeah. I feel like there was another one, or like when we go to that shop up in Plano, and it's just a wall of like historical tabletop games, and I'm like, this is not what I want to play. So I don't know, it's probably just a me thing. I love history, I just don't want to play it as a game.
Yeah, really quick shout out to Madness Games and Comics in Plano. That's who we're talking about. It once was a small, like Walmart-esque shop, and it wasn't Walmart.
I don't think that's the word you're looking for.
But it was a small, like, electronics store, but size of a grocery store almost.
That's pretty big.
Yeah, and they turned it into a game store, and it is filled.
Okay.
I mean, it is massive inside.
It is really cool. Yeah, if you're ever in the Dallas Plano area, it's worth stopping into.
Our local game store, like one of the biggest ones in the area, could fit in 1/3 of it. It's huge.
Yeah. But anyway.
But so it was a draft of Deadlands that saw Pinnacle really kick off. He shopped it around to some friends, and the friends were like, okay, we're going to throw some money your way and back the company, and that is really the launching point of this, of Pinnacle to become what it is today. Now, the source, the origin of it, in 1996, Hensley released Deadlands after being inspired to create an RPG based off a Brahm piece of art for an Old West vampire. Which I think is really kind of cool because Brahm is actually tied to so many properties in RPGs. He did artwork for Palladium's it was the Night series. I can't remember the one, but it was vampires and other things. Nightbane. He did art for that. Deadlands, obviously. But what is it? Dark Sun.
He was heavily tied to Dark Sun.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
D&D 2nd edition, yep.
Yeah, I mean, his art flavored so many RPGs, and he still does art, I believe, for RPGs. I think a couple things have come out from him. He did the art that's the cover for the most recent Conan game by Mongoose. Like the
By Modifius?
Yeah, by Modifius.
Okay, you said Mongoose.
Sorry. Well, Mongoose put out one too, and they're both British.
Well, and you were talking about Mongoose yesterday, and so I think you just got it on the brain.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, to me, it's a really interesting thing that ties in that way.
Sure.
But so later that same year, they released a dystopian superhero game called The Brave New World, which I'm not really familiar with, and
I own it.
Oh, you do?
I bought it. I read bits and pieces of it. I never really did anything with it, but yeah, it's like it's a supers game.
Yeah.
But it's got a darker side to it. Sure.
See, it actually sounds like something John would enjoy playing.
Yeah.
Because he's always, superhero games are his niche anyway.
Yep.
But
There's a lot of red, white, and blue in the cover.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Very patriotic dystopian superheroes.
Yeah.
But so the year that Deadlands released, it got 2 Origin Awards, which for me is a big thing. The Origin Awards I have a lot of respect for. I think the Ennies have kind of taken on a lot more weight as well. But it got Best Role-Playing Rules and Best Graphic Presentation of a Role-Playing Game, Adventure, or Supplement.
Nice.
So, yeah. So Deadlands has had a huge footprint on the market that I really had no idea. I mean, there are things I knew about all these different things, but I didn't realize how they tied together. Because there's tons of Deadlands spin-offs. So in 1996, you have the original. 99, you have the revised Deadlands, which was replaced by the Savage Worlds base system. 2006, 2000. Yeah.
The neat thing. I don't know if you're aware. The neat thing that they did with the rule system was when the game first came out, because they obviously they didn't know it was going to really do very well. They created a single rule book that was a player's guide and a GM's guide. In
nice.
Deadlands, the GM is called the Marshal. So it was players' information and Marshal information all in one book.
Yeah.
And then it took off, and then they did a second hardcover called The Quick and the Dead, which. Nice. Was a bunch of players' material and Marshal material again. And then when they kind of tweaked the rules and revised it 3 years later, then they split it into a player's guide and a Marshal's guide.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was just it was a weird. So it was an odd release in that, because I remember really being like playing the game in its original inception, because I was used to D&D where you always had a dungeon master's guide that does this is my book. I'm the DM. You don't get to look at this.
Yeah.
But I was, I'm running Deadlands and we're sharing my copy of the book around the table. Nice. And it's like, I need that back because it's got all the Marshall stuff in it.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of games started doing that, the single source book. But one of the things I kind of wonder about, and this was something I couldn't really find information on, I know that the artwork by Brom was originally intended, the artwork that inspired him was intended to be in a White Wolf book that was never released. Like White Wolf was going to put out that it was going to be a cover for them for a Western vampire book that they never ever put out. Mm-hmm. But I'm kind of curious because there is a Deadlands book with a vampire cowboy on the front with 2 handguns. And I was like, is that the same art? And it's a piece of information I have not been able to find. So I didn't. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything specifically about that. Literally, right before we started talking here, I was watching a World of Darkness documentary. And I want to say that, by 95, 96, when this game is coming out, White Wolf was in its heyday.
Oh, yeah.
World of Darkness was as big as it was ever going to get. So I imagine that if they wanted to make something and they decided not to, it was simply because they had too many other things to make.
Oh, yeah.
And it may have just been, they might have just been, reaching for the stars and just not had, quite enough manpower and money to put behind something. So something had to get the axe. That's possible. That's all conjecture based on what I.
Oh yeah, sure.
The year that it was, but so I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah, but so they did a D20 rule system in 2001.
Sure.
Which of course in 2001, who wasn't doing a D20 supplement? October 2001, they put GURPS out with Steve Jackson Games. And they did a Deadlands Hexes supplement and a Deadlands Varmints supplement. So,
I like that. I like that theme there.
Yeah.
I like that. So instead of magic and a bestiary, you have a Varmints book. I like that. So.
Well, in Deadlands, it was Rascal. The bestiary is Rascals, Varmints, and Critters.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. That's what I like.
It's a good wording, and it really
it adds to the
theme.
setting because everything's got a bestiary.
Yeah, the whole line is written like that, so it's all written in old timey Western speak.
Nice.
Yeah,
I love that.
But so 2006 was Savage Worlds rules for Deadlands Reloaded, which is the version that Roxy's much more familiar with.
Yeah.
And then in May 2017, Deadlands 20th Anniversary Edition is published after a successfully crowdfunding campaign in 2016. So now that is just the Deadlands itself as as the central theme. Spin-offs that came out of this.
I mean, this is a huge list, John. I don't know if we need to read everything.
Well, I'm just going to read the titles.
Okay.
So, Deadlands: The Great Rail Wars, Doomtown, Range Wars, Deadlands: Hell on Earth, Deadlands
spectacular.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Deadlands: Lost Colony.
Hell on Earth is as good as Deadlands easily.
Okay,
nice.
Awesome.
The Deadlands: Lost Colony collector card game. Deadlands: The Battle for Slaughter Gulch, Frag Deadlands. There was a Deadlands video game that was in production. Deadlands Noir, which we actually have the book for.
We're actually going to try to play on a future Seriously Let's Play season.
Yeah. Doomtown Reloaded, which is the classic card game that came back through. And then, of course, the non-gaming spin-offs, you have comics that came out from Image Comics in 99 and in 2012, and a series of novelizations, most of which that I found were like in 2015.
Okay.
And in 2014, Microsoft bought the rights to a Deadlands TV series, which was slated for release in 2015 but never materialized, which I'm kind of saying that could have been cool.
Yeah,
I remember hearing about that and being so stoked for it, and now and then it just went away, and now I'm thinking about it again, and I'm like, oh, I'm sad.
And it's just, and Microsoft's never going to let it go either. They're just going to sit there with it.
It took a long time for them to let go of so many properties. Yeah. Like,
well, it depends. It depends on how they structured the contract as well, because there are oftentimes with film. With IPs, made into film properties, there's often a something built into the contract where they have to release a movie every so often, every certain amount of time, or the rights revert.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it's possible that Microsoft is paying for extensions because they're still trying to get something to happen.
Yeah, that could be.
And they're re-upping the contract even though they haven't made something. Who knows? Yeah. So it's entirely possible that it could go back to the Pinnacle, and they could try to get somebody else to do something, even if Microsoft never goes anywhere with it.
I would hope so, and
we have so many terrible Hellraiser movies.
Way too many.
The Hellraiser movies has to put one out every 3 years, and they do, and they all suck, and that's why the Hellraiser license hasn't gone back to be available for somebody else to make a good one.
Yeah, that sucks.
Oh,
I'm cranky.
I'm right there with you. Hellraiser is the original two are way up there in my structuring of horror movies. And they actually put out a trailer to make a new one about 3-4 years ago, and it was shut down. And the only thing that exists now is the trailer. Nice. And I highly recommend people go track it down. It is creepy. It is wonderful. It takes place in hell. It doesn't take place on Earth. It's all about the Cenobites' war for kind of their political structure and wars that they do. So
crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry. I'm a huge Clive Barker fan. I love it.
But you like crazy sexy and crazy scary? Read anything by Clive Barker. It's all sexy and scary.
Yeah. Except for it's the children's book one.
Oh, sure. He's an incredibly prolific guy. So the horror stuff, there's
he did
there's heavy sexuality in almost everything he does for horror.
Oh yeah. No. It says something about John and mine's relationship that he wanted to read to me before we'd go to sleep.
Uh-huh.
And he read, what was it?
The Books of Blood.
The Books of Blood to
me. The Books of Blood.
Yeah, so that was the
We'd
first
go to
year
bed
of
reading horror novels.
books, yeah. So
So, yeah, we're normal people
Sweet
here.
dreams, honey.
Yeah.
But Clive Barker's Thief of Always.
About a whole bunch of people dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay, go ahead.
No. Thief of Always by Clive Barker is an absolutely amazing children's book. Almost, it's meant more for like a tween crowd, but brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I actually, when I was working in education to some extent on the peripheries of it, I actually turned that one in, saying that this is a book that I think will one day be a classic, like 20, 30 years, from now. People will look back at that book and say,
That's why you're not in education anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. Well, so going on from there, though, Deadlands has, over its lifetime, won 9 Origin Awards as a theme. So best, the 2 that it already has. Best Science Fiction or Fantasy Miniature Rules in 1997. Best Role-Playing Adventure in 1997, also for Independence Day. Best Trading Card Game in 98. Best Graphic Presentation of a Card Game. Best Science Fiction or Fantasy Figure Miniature in 1998 for Hanging Judge, as well as...
It was a great mini.
Yeah. Best Vehicle Miniature for Velocipede. And Role-Playing Game Supplement of 2007 for Deadlands Reloaded. And,
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean... That says a lot.
Well, I was looking and I was thinking, and I don't know a whole lot about the history of necessarily like card games, but I was seeing best graphic presentation of a card game in 1998, and I'm like, I know Magic was out, and I assumed that these would also be games that would be included in the same
category.
The
absolutely.
same category, Pokemon and Dragon Ball and Yu-Gi-Oh! And all that stuff that was...
Pokemon probably. I don't know if Yu-Gi-Oh! Had hit really
Pokemon
hard.
itself appeared in 96. I was actually looking at the list of...
Oh, that's right. Pokemon was like brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about the card game thing is that you can pretty easily get a lot of, every year can be somebody different to win that. Yeah. Because it's when the card game first comes out and now you see the graphic design of that card game. Because year to year, the graphic design of an individual card game generally doesn't change.
Sure.
Because you want all the cards to kind of fit the set.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Magic, I think, is the only reason Magic has changed so drastic. I mean, I won't say drastically, but it has had some graphic updates, but it's also been around for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
So,
been around forever.
Amazing to think.
But the 90s were a dark time for Magic cards, in my opinion. I don't play Magic, but I sell a lot of it, and I look at, no, the art got so much better later.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Roxy actually works in a game store. So she does a lot of the day in and day out with all the stuff we talk about. So but so Deadlands as a setting, here's where the rubber meets the road.
Sure.
What is it that people are playing?
I like I said, my familiarity has always been from a viewer standpoint. I've never gotten to play Deadlands because Savage Worlds was not a game. We've talked about my brief history with gaming. I'm not a rookie anymore, but I've only been tabletop gaming since 2014 regularly, especially RPG gaming.
Yeah.
And I all my GMs, nobody ever played Savage Worlds. So it was kind of a shock to I won't say shock to the system, that sounds like jarring, but it was watching Wildcards was such a refreshing change from a lot of the systems that we play because it's completely different. Yeah. It still uses a full poly set, but in a completely different way. And and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, because I'm going from a Savage Worlds deluxe edition understanding of the rule set but Deadlands was the precursor to that. Is that kind of still the same way that it played?
Deadlands was a much more robust and dice-heavy system.
Okay.
You had 10 core traits, and each one had a series of skills underneath it, and each trait had a rating in dice from D4s up to D12s, but you could have multiple dice.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
You could have between 1 and 4 of those dice. And so... You could literally have one of them would be rated a 2d6 and another would be a 3d8 and one would be 1d12 and one would be a 4d4.
Okay, I see.
And so it was a much more complex system. And with Savage Worlds, they stripped it down to kind of just one die.
Right, with the exploding or the aces or whatever.
Yeah. And it was actually kind of funny because we're kind of mixing setting into mechanics. We'll just talk about the game.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Right?
Yeah,
no worries. Because
that when it came out, this was like we were in the very earliest era of the internet, and I was looking around for Deadlands stuff online, and I found somebody who actually had worked out, from a statistics standpoint, which dice ratings are better than which.
Oh,
because
wow.
I wanted to be able to show the players that 1d12, yeah, it's a d12, but it's not very good.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of other dice combinations that are higher than that are better.
Oh yeah.
So I had when I would run it, I would actually give people the list, just so you know, if you really want to rank stuff, here's your best trait, your worst trait, your middle.
Nice.
This is the actual breakdown of all of that. But then then it got weird too, because when you went down to skills, you had skill ratings that were in numbers, and that would be a number of that die type that the trait was. So you could very quickly have the skill only go from being the trait could be 46, but the skill under it could be 1d6.
Oh, okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, it was very different, and I was coming out of D&D and World of Darkness stuff, where the dice rolling was, relatively speaking, more straightforward, because it was pretty much you knew what was better than what. And so the dice mechanics was a little more complex for me and people that I was playing the game with. But we embraced the setting, and because I've mentioned before, the Western and the horror and some fantasy kind of stuff, and then plenty of humor.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
To it.
No, I love, like I said, it really kind of invigorated a sense of, it became a setting that I really enjoyed, a Western setting that I really enjoyed. It felt familiar in the stuff that I had, like I said, grown up watching with with my dad and grandpa, but it was completely different. I enjoyed the, and I'm not sure you've said that some of the history has obviously been updated over the last 20 plus years that it's been in existence. But I love that alternate history. And I know in Deadlands Reloaded, there's like Colorado as a contested territory. And it's just interesting to me to see that dynamic, because you really don't see that in any other Western setting post Civil War.
Yeah. No.
And I like this kind of strung out conflict or drawn out conflict that parts. There are. I don't know. It makes the American Western landscape so much more interesting to me, which I know it was an interesting time, and it was cool anyway. But I guess I've always seen the normal stuff. I like this idea of it being different, and the Civil War is still going on in the 1870s, and Oklahoma is its own thing, and nobody has claim to it, and Colorado isn't claimed, or stuff like that.
Well, adding to that, there is, from what I've seen, elements that are somewhat steampunkish. Ever so often.
Sure, yeah, there's the...
It did the steampunk thing before steampunk really became a thing, so it never got tied into... when we think of steampunk now, you usually think of, Victorian era.
Exactly.
And there's a certain aesthetic with brass and brown, and a lot of gears and things that, some people say might identify as cliche. And there's plenty of stuff. There's plenty of stuff that breaks that mold as well. But... yeah, it was steam tech, but it was ghost rock steam tech. So it was you weren't burning coal, you were burning ghost rock. It was this weird mineral that was found, and it screamed when it burned. And so it had all this flavor to it.
Sure.
But it was ultimately, it was still steam tech.
Did they call it, in the original Deadlands, was it called New Science? Some of the...
it was weird science. It was mad science.
Okay. Okay, I think in Deadlands Reloaded, or at least in Savage Worlds Deluxe Edition, I feel like they call it... it seems like the phrase that I remember is New Science, which is essentially kind of magic-y.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to use... It's like people don't like that word in polite society, so it's referred to as New Science. And there are places where it's completely not accepted. And then other places where it's, that kind of innovation is welcomed.
Yeah. But other things, I mean, when I think of the themes that you get with this game, I mean, it is the Old West, obviously, but there is something to be said about, in the gaming world, a certain sense of anarchy. And I know this sounds odd, but in the gaming world, like, a lot of times people play characters that are just on the outskirts of the law or completely outside of the law. Like they're
murder hobos.
Yeah. Well, there's murder hobos, but then there's snake oil salesmen and gamblers and people who they take the right actions. They know that what they're doing is moral, even if it's not ethical. You know, the anarchy of the Old West kind of allows that. You know, it kind of allows people to be those characters. And
exactly. It embraces the anarchy that was the Old West in real, where everybody was kind of forging their own way, and you didn't really have the government there so much. Technically, there was a government, back east, right? But they weren't really able to control too much of what you were able to do because it was the 1870s, and there was like, how are they going to enforce that? Because okay, you do something wrong, and then word gets back to Washington, and then they send somebody after you, and so 3 weeks later. Somebody comes and brings the hammer down for you doing something, and by that time you've moved on. And then just built in like the fact that there was all this really kind of wild stuff going on with monsters and magic and everything else too. So it just ramps up that chaos.
Absolutely. And so I think the setting overall feeds that portion of gaming. But other things within it, when I really think about everything that comes around, I feel like the characters, you get to participate in a story a lot more, I think, for Deadlands than I feel like you do sometimes in regular fantasy. I feel like the characters can become more of a part of the world and have an effect. But other than that, I mean, I'm trying to think. There's obviously some of the magic in it is really interesting. A quick side note that
the original game rules, I'm not sure exactly how the rules stand right now because I haven't looked at it recently, but there's an aptitude, a skill in the game called tale telling, which is like a charisma based kind of thing. And because when the world goes to hell and all these horrors start showing up, different areas become infested and strung through with all this horror and terror and all this bad stuff, and they become Deadlands. That's what the term refers to. This where everything gets a little darker, like the sun never quite shines as brightly, the nights are a little colder, everybody's a little more nervous, the higher the Deadland rating is in the area. And you can, as these characters, go and fight back the monsters in the night and make things better, and then tell the story of how you did that using your tale telling skill and actually change the Deadland rating.
Okay.
And make things better for the people there. So it actually had a mechanic where you literally made a difference in the town or the county or whatever.
That's awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the telling part, but I was familiar with, I'm not sure if they have Deadlands ratings anymore, but I do know that like an area could become a Deadland essentially, due to some sort of event. But no, that's really awesome. I kind of like that spin to it. I don't know if that's in the rules, and I just haven't seen that. But I like that you can that you have impact on the
world.
setting.
Yeah. Now, other things that I definitely want to bring up with the Deadlands series, which started with the first one and is still around, is the use of playing cards. So playing cards.
I like that.
Playing cards was a method of initiative and at the same time added flavor for the game. Because gambling and cards and everything is definitely something that is heavily tied to the Old West as well. Tombstone, my mind immediately goes to Doc Holliday sitting in the bar at Tombstone running tables. But,
yeah.
And the playing card thing went beyond initiative in original Deadlands too. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not completely sure where it stands with the current version of Deadlands under Savage Worlds, but the playing cards also, that's how if you wanted to generate your character, generally speaking, the standard way to generate your character was you flipped over playing cards.
Nice.
And if then each suit was tied to well, each card, the pip value and the suits were tied to different things, and so you would generate the suit generated 1 through 4 dice, and then the pip value generated the die type. And if you flipped a Joker, you got a what do they call them? It was a something background. Crap, what was it called? But it was one of the ways you could have like a really weird thing going on with your character.
Awesome.
I'm blanking on the term. And one of the ways that could happen too then was you would flip another card to determine what that thing was. And if you flipped another Joker, then you came back, you were harrowed. You were a zombie.
Yeah,
there was a Manitou, an evil spirit inside of you animating your body and taking control of you ever so often.
Okay, yeah. I'm familiar with that concept, the harrowed and the Manitous. It's pretty gruesome, when you really think when you get into it. But no, that's awesome. So instead of kind of like rolling on a table, you're flipping.
You flip cards, and then the playing cards also worked into if you were a huckster, which was the wizard, that's the magic user of the Deadlands world. You'd make a trait check, you'd make a dice check based on the hex that you were casting, and that the result of that would then determine if you did poorly on the check, you would just draw 5 cards. But if you did well on the check, you would draw additional cards, and then you would make the best 5-card poker hand. And every hex was listed out. The effect was based on the poker hand. So it was just high card pairs, jacks are better, and then on up. And so if you got really lucky and managed to pull like a full house or a straight or something, you would have a ridiculously powerful hex.
No, that has still carried over somewhat into, or that is still prominent in the new Savage Worlds setup of it. One of the characters on the show that I watched was a huckster, and they also have the ability to, and if because there was a PowerPoint system, were there magic points in the original Deadlands, or was it all solely based on the hand?
Originally, there was no point system to anything.
Okay.
In some of the supplemental stuff that came for Deadlands, and then very much so for the Deadlands Hell on Earth, there were special classes, so to speak, or special abilities that you could have that would have points of some sort related to them. And then when there came a point where they started to kind of reinvent the older ones that didn't have points to have points.
Oh, okay, yeah, because there is a point system
to tie that whole system together.
Yeah, there is like depending on your. I'm not sure, because I haven't ever created a hex creature or a character, but or a huckster or anything. But they do have a number of like power points that they can spend, or so if they don't want to spend their power points to cast a certain spell, they can then deal a hand of poker with the Joker or a Manitou or whoever, and then it's whoever wins that hand determines if the spell actually goes off or if it backfires horribly or whatever. But that's kind of where they've done both of those. They've kind of integrated those mechanics.
Yeah. Now, talking about all these things, so obviously there's some ties going on here. I mean, the original system was simplified into Deadlands: The Great Rail Wars, and then was again later simplified into the Savage World system.
Sure.
And so, I mean, we're talking 30 years of system changes, and Savage Worlds is absolutely immense right now as a property. I don't want to say it's
definitely garnering more attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a brief time there, Eloy Lasanta had a show where he talked to different creators on it, and he had on the creator of Savage Worlds, and they talked about what it took and different properties and his open his open licensing, and it's not an open license, but because he wants to actually see the products that are going to go out for his system.
Yeah, he wants.
It's you have to submit a certain amount of product that you're going to do to just to demonstrate that you have a clear understanding of the system and that it's going to be quality, and then you can that gets you the use of the Savage Worlds logo.
And yeah, no, I mean, it's gotten amazing. And I really applaud it because, I mean, Pinnacle isn't, like, it's not one of the huge companies, but I still kind of see it on the outskirts of the indie scene. And so I love everything they're doing. We grabbed a hard copy of their the new Savage Worlds Adventure Edition. So
yeah, I had watched some because they're using Suede on the show now for their East Texas University show. They were using preview rules for Suede, but they also do a lot of work with guys directly at Pinnacle.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's Shane or not, I don't remember. I know, but Clint and Jody Black are very involved with the Wildcard show. But yeah, like as far as companies that are picking up Suede, or at least Savage Worlds Adventure Week is starting to publish stuff under with the Savage Worlds Suede rule set specifically.
Yeah. And I know you said you weren't going to push anything of your own while you're here, but Craig, I definitely want to point out that Capers, actually, you have a licensing agreement also, correct?
Yeah, there's a CAPERS core rule system. Basically, it defines, in the book, I define what portions of the book, the rules, basically the rules, are considered, they're released under Creative Commons. And so if somebody wants to make something out of the game, they can. And I know of a couple of people who are looking in at doing that. It's a question of whether it gets completed and when it comes out and all that sort of thing. But I'll say this too. I mean, CAPERS entirely, it uses playing cards entirely. There's no dice at all. And my diving down the rabbit hole of seeing what you can do with playing cards and how you can turn that into a game system came very much out of my love of Deadlands and how playing cards are integrated so deeply into the original systems.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Absolutely. Well,
absolutely.
Two last things on this. So talking about Deadlands as a property, and I always say, where is it now? Where is it going? Mm-hmm. So there is currently, as we are speaking, a Kickstarter going, and I think it's in its last 2 weeks, for Deadlands Lost Colony and Wendigo Tales Book 1. And by the time this episode releases, it will have just wrapped up the Kickstarter. So, I mean, this is a property that is building, growing, and continuing. And I think it was within 2 weeks of its Kickstarter announcement that it had already funded. So they're already funded, and people are continuing to.
Sure.
The property's growing. Yeah.
Well, it's the whole series from Deadlands all the way up to the Savage World stuff now is well beloved. Pinnacle has done an excellent job of creating a system that they've managed to not only reinvent the system multiple times to kind of target different types of audiences and to turn the game into something a little different, but then also expand the system into different genres and to have open license involvement for other creators to come on and create support material and their own subgenre and settings and things. And they've done like all the stuff. Like if you want to look at what are all the different ways a game company can manage to keep afloat and keep making things, like Pinnacle has done like all of them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh yeah, no, we
always coming up with something.
We circled by their booth at Gen Con, and it was not just a booth; it was it was an amazing setup. But so both these are coming out now. I also want to say, and I don't know if you've seen the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition system. They're using very similar artwork as well for the new release, and I think it looks amazing. Definitely kind of, I feel the element of the little bit more sci-fi beyond in Lost Colony. But that
for those who are listening and don't realize that we talked a bit about Deadlands. Then there's Deadlands Hell on Earth, which moves the storyline forward to our near future and makes it like a post-apocalyptic wasted west. Mm-hmm. And then Lost Colony takes it further into the future and twists the whole kind of idea of Deadlands into a science fiction game where you're colonizing a new world. Like an actual new planet, and there's a colony that becomes lost. It becomes cut off from Earth.
Yep. And these are games that are slated for release to the general public in June of 2020. The Lost Colony. So
yeah, and it's
right
the
before
Suede update.
Yeah, right before Gen Con. So I'm like, oh, there's something to look forward to. So
Yeah, always doing something though.
Always.
Those
That's
pinnacle people.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, my final question that I always ask everybody, but even though I know the answer on this one, I think everybody does, and that is, Deadlands. Would you play it? I mean, if you had the opportunity
right now, I'd play it right now if you want me to.
Yeah.
Nice.
If you want to stop recording this and immediately play Deadlands, I will play Deadlands with you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. No, I would love to. Go ahead.
I have
Trevor.
many
Finish.
books.
No, I mean this is it. This is the banter. I mean, I myself, I would play it definitely.
Sure.
I mean, I played.
I
just
would like to try the old one with the original Deadlands. I shouldn't say the old one. The classic Deadlands.
There you go.
Before it was reloaded for Savage
OG
Worlds.
Deadlands.
Yeah. Vanilla Deadlands.
The 20th anniversary
OG,
edition.
by the way, for Deadlands, OG stands for Original Gunslinger.
Nice. Nicely done. Yes.
But the 20th anniversary edition, which came out I think 3 years ago or less. That one actually uses the original rules, so it's a re-envisioning and brings the original rules forward.
Okay.
So it's not.
See, I think I can get that one in the store.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
I have a hard time getting the Suede Core rule book is completely sold out already.
Yeah.
I can't get a hold of it. I've been trying to get East Texas University. I can't get a hold of it. So, but I think I can. That one. I think I can get the Deadlands 20th anniversary just to have it, because I know even though it's not the Savage Worlds one that has been showcased on Undeadwood, I've had people come in and go, "Hey, do you have this Deadlands setting? Have you ever heard of it?" And I'm like, "Oh, please, yes. I know a few things about the games, okay?" So you're not showing me anything new.
Yeah.
Even though they do often. There's so many role-playing games out there, but that one I know.
Oh, yeah. No, there's some...
In fact, I'm going to point them to this RPG, or this podcast, and be like, hey, yeah, we talk about it.
Yeah. And, I mean, the books... I'm sorry. My brain, I can wander all over this topic, because my thought is Barnes & Noble, I still remember coming across, books for Deadlands, which to me is a huge thing.
Like novels?
Novels.
The novels,
The novelizations... Because I still remember, you walk to the last section of the sci-fi fantasy section of Barnes & Noble, and you've got a small section of Dragon Age that's D&D, Forgotten Realms, all the, Star Wars, Star Trek, all these major properties that people are publishing all these books for, and I still remember seeing a section, it was small, but I still remember seeing a section for Deadlands.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, that it's lined up with all those things. Yeah.
Planned forever.
Absolutely. Well, Craig, this is probably going to call it for the show today.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful having you on. We always love talking with you. And for our listeners, we've had Craig on twice before talking about his products. Please go back in the library and pull them up and take a look. And, of course, Craig, if people want to track you down online, where are some places they can find you?
You can check out everything that I'm doing at nerdburgergames.com. There's a contact page on there that'll point you to Discord and all that fun stuff too. You can buy all the stuff that I make at drivethroughrpg.com, and I am at nerdburgercraig on Twitter.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
And we'll share all that in the show notes as well, so you guys can just do one handy click.
Yep. And I will say this, I feel like, Craig, you kind of... I know you're probably going to say I'm probably wrong, but I really feel that you kind of pioneered the whole Discord RPG community, and your Discord community for Nerdburger Games is amazing. So
Some cool people on there. There's it waxes and wanes in its activity, but there are times when I'm like, hey, well, oh my goodness, I've got like a nice little community built here. I never managed to do with Google Groups. I never managed to quite do with Facebook with a company page, but Discord made it happen.
Yes. Yeah. No, your Discord is wonderful, and I'm telling all the people out there listening, go check out his Discord, because if you're looking for people who are interested in capers or gaming in general, it is great.
Awesome.
It is great. So go check it out. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for our show tonight. This is Tome Travelers with Craig, Roxy, and John. We'll see y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Fast Moving Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.